And yet, Iran has pressure points as well. And you've seen Iran use those pressure points against the U.S., for example, on that rocket attack on Friday that took place. That's when a U.S. contractor died and then 4 U.S. service members were wounded. In retaliation for that, the U.S. had those airstrikes. And those airstrikes killed, I believe, 24 was the latest count, 5 different sites, 2 in Syria, 3 in Iraq. Now you have this Iranian-backed militia, them protesting outside of the embassy. And it's not that you're at a stalemate, but you certainly have a fair amount of rhetoric on both sides and no obvious ways to de-escalate. And you have the president's press secretary talking about a response in the terms of when and how, and it being totally up to the president. And the president is very clear, squarely laying the blame at Iran, saying they are responsible. Katie?
Hans Nichols, Ali Arouzi, and Mustafa Salim, thank you guys very much. And let's bring in the executive editor of Defense One, Kevin Barron, and former State Department senior advisor, Nayyera Haq. Nayyera, what can you add to this conversation?
Point out that the United States hasn't had an official military presence since 2011 when the status of forces agreement expired. So since then, the United States has been operating with about 4,000 to 5,000 defense contractors. Of course, the Marines that protect every embassy and under hardship conditions. Diplomats there do not bring their families. They do not bring any accompanied groups. They are very much under tight security. It has been an insecure environment for quite some time, with the United States trying to have some sort of diplomatic relationship with the people and government of Iraq. The challenge being that even the U.S. military, the Army, released a report earlier this year saying the only winner of the war in Iraq, the United States launch, is Iran. Iran has become emboldened, it has become expansionist, and ultimately, as we see today, now they are taking an opportunity in Iraq to attack U.S. Institutions.
How much of this has to do with, or is it a reaction to, the U.S. backing out of the Iran deal, Nayyera?
I think part of the challenge we see is that the president came in with a very bellicose, strident tone against Iran. And that's the same architect of the Iraq war. John Bolton was the national security advisor. He just tweeted today making references to how this reminds him of 1979. We need to take strong action against Iran. So we went from an administration that was looking to really have diplomacy throughout the region, bring everybody into the fold of the international order, to suddenly the United States launching those rhetorical bombs, and Iran is reacting accordingly.
Kevin, I'm reminded of Mike Flynn, who was the national security advisor for a short time, coming out and talking to reporters from the White House podium in the press room very early in 2017 and saying, Iran, you're on notice. Right. This has been escalating now for some time.
It has. Look, I'm going to bring a lot of caution to the discussion against equating what's going on today to anything in the past, and also reminding viewers and readers to consider what's been going on for several months. So Iraq itself is in turmoil because it's really, as your reporters are saying, fighting for its own identity and for new leadership. It's wrong to talk about Iran in Iraq, or the Iraq government, or American interests, or these PMF militias as all giant blocks. For a long time, since the end of the Iraq war and since as the ISIS war has wound down, what's been happening in Iraq on the military side is that these PMF Iranian-backed militias that had fought ISIS, that were basically in coordination with Americans, with the Iraqis. The Iraqi government plan was to help fold some of them into the official Iraqi security structure with the U.S. blessing, and that these are not all bad guys just because they're Iranian-backed. These are Iraqis who are fighting for freedom. They want good things, and we want good relations. That was what was brewing. Separate from that has been this political fight. So the political fight has crossed with the security fight, and I think it's almost wrong to just hype this into a giant conflation that Trump's backing out of the Iran deal, and the outcome of ISIS has all led to all of these things. Iran is just in a very tough situation. Iraq is in a tough situation right now.
So what's the solution, Kevin? I know that's a huge question to ask you, but what if you need to look at it in a more nuanced way, which I think is always correct, to look at things in a nuanced way and rather just painting with a general brush. How do American forces, how does the American government confront a crisis like this? And how do they mitigate it?
Think about how Hans responded, right? There's tactical and strategic. So today we have protesters. We have a large group of protesters that got to the outer wall and have damaged the reception area. The Iraqi compound is enormous, the Baghdad embassy compound. So they haven't stormed the embassy. They haven't taken it over. This isn't Iraqi policy. This isn't an Iranian attack on an American. We just call it exactly what it is and watch and wait what happens. The United States has had a very kid glove, almost hands-off approach with Iraq the last several months as Iraq figures itself out. I'm not sure what the Trump administration would be able to do differently to steer the country one way or another. But the difficulty is that Iran is poking and prodding. They bombed American ships and foreign ships in the Straits in the summer. This is the latest example of the Iranian government trying to
But are they poking and prodding because they feel emboldened after the pullout of the Iran deal?
Perhaps. I don't know. I don't know how much the Iran deal has anything to do, because even while the Iran deal was going on, Iran was still engaged in and terrorism activity. They were still funding terrorists. So the Iran deal was more about nuclear weapons than about terrorism and missiles. When it comes to terrorism, the Iranians haven't stopped. They have emboldened, and they've been more visibly trying to test America's will. And the red line was always supposed to be no Americans were killed, no American troops were directly killed, and that all changed when the militia hit that base and someone died, an American contractor died. Of course the United States is going to respond, you expect that, and of course there's going to be some anger, and that's what we're in the middle of. I think long term, Iraq remains and will always remain a strategic hub for the United States. The Trump administration is going to continue to talk tough on Iran, but even now, the Trump administration is not directly confronting Iran. There's not violence. We're not opening fire on these protesters. Sending in Marines is frankly, it's a Band-Aid move. It's not required. There's enough firepower there. So we'll see how this plays in the next couple of days, and whether the rest of Iraq, all those other protesters who are fighting for democracy and for something totally different than this group of protesters, we'll see how it all plays out.
Kevin Barron, Nayyera Hawk. Guys, thank you very much. Happy New Year. And coming up, New York's plan to fight the